soldiers marching us to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before.
Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Make certain to hit the like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell to be among the first to receive updates on videos like this and many others. So, today I made my mother cry. My mother said to me, "I want you to be that sweet little boy Richie again." And I informed her that that was not going to happen. That sweet, little, suicidal, scared, frightened boy, Richie, does not exist anymore. It all began because I got a text from a family member who asked to speak with me. This family member is transgender, and I will not identify this person any further for their own autonomy. But within the confines of this family, there were some transphobic words that were used against this person. So I listened and I did what I could. The next day, I phoned my mother, whom in many ways is my best friend. She does try to be a good friend and a good mother. She does try. But my mother said, "Boy, there was drama today." I said, "Yes, I know. I heard." She said, "Who told you?" And I said, "It was the person that was affected mostly by this." And my mother said, "Well, let me tell you," she said, "that there's two sides of the story and you weren't here." And I said, "Well, there were some transphobic things that were said to this person, and I feel that that person needs to be accepted and needs to know that it's okay to be who they are, and they need to feel love, and they need to feel like there's peace. And at home should not be a place where they feel outside." And that's where my mother said, "Well, you've got this West Coast mentality." And I went, "Okay, I don't really know what that means. When you think of a West Coast mentality, do you think of this?" Because that certainly isn't me. I wear a suit every single day, and I live in a Victorian home that could find its place in the East Coast anywhere. It's in Pasadena, so I didn't quite know what that West Coast mentality was supposed to be. I mean, I did know. Because you see, in that part of the world, now I know my mother is in her 80s and she's a devout Christian, but in that part of the world, they cannot differentiate between politics and religion. There is no separation of church and state. My mother has said it to me before. "Oh, well, you're one of those liberal Democrats now, but no, I'm claiming you for Jesus. I know that you're going to see the light. And then you'll come back and you'll say, 'Mom, you were right.' And then you'll give up this liberal Democrat stuff. And you'll come back and be that sweet little boy that I knew." I told her, I said, "Mother, that sweet little boy doesn't exist anymore. He doesn't." And it got me to thinking about the many reasons that I left the church, the many reasons that I am not a Christian. When I was a little boy, my parents owned a 1959 Buick Electra, 4-door hardtop. It was beautiful. And it was pink. And pink just so happened to be my favorite color. Well, one day my father was working on that car, and I sat next to him on a cinder block wearing, at the time, my favorite color combination of pink and turquoise. Pink, my mother always said, looked so good on me. She later regretted it. She said that she should never have let me wear pink because it made me gay. We'll get back to that. But I was there helping my father. This is sort of the first point that I started realizing and having questions. But I was helping my father by sitting on a cinder block. And my little wrists were just flailing all over the place, and I was speaking on all kinds of over-the-top, flamboyant imaginations that a 7-year-old could. And my father rolled out from under that car, and he dusted himself off. And his low southern voice dropped about 3 octaves. And he had this strange look on his face. And he said, "Son, I want you to stop acting like a... I want you to stop acting like... I want you to start acting more like a boy." He turned around and went into the house, and I was confused. I didn't understand what that meant either, because I was a boy, and how does one act like a boy if you're a boy? I didn't understand. He later became one of my greatest advocates. In fact, that same year, he built me a dollhouse. And in my teenage years, when I was really suicidal and really sad and really confused and really didn't understand, I started wearing eccentric vintage clothing. It was sort of, look at this, don't look at that. Laugh at this, don't look at that. And people would go, "Look at that weird kid. What's wrong with that kid?" And my father would puff his chest out and he would say, "That's my son. And he wears top hats and tailcoats and spats and capes. And if I could, I would dress just like him." And they would go, oh, okay. But the damage at this point had been done. I started to see that I was different. I started to see the way that I was treated differently than my brothers. I started to see that the other boys in school were treated differently. I was different and I didn't understand it, so I would watch to try to figure out, how am I so strange? My recesses were spent sitting on the swings. I would watch. How does a boy act like a boy? How is it any different? They run like I do. They like cars like I do. How do they act differently than me? And when I was tired of observing and my brain hurt from all the thinking, I would swing. I would pump that swing higher and higher and imagine what it would be like to fall into the sky, to just keep falling up, to never have to think anymore, to just keep falling in that upward direction. And I would go to church, and well-meaning Christians would try to pray the gay demon out of me. And I didn't know what they meant. I had no idea what they meant. My older brothers would go, "Richie!" I didn't even know what that meant. But I read in the Bible somewhere, and I can't remember the verse now, but it's something about being perfect as Christ was perfect, something along those lines. And I thought, well, I'm not perfect. Maybe if I'm perfect, maybe then I can be loved. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll be perfect, because then I can be loved, then I can have value. The more I strove to be perfect, the more I realized I wasn't perfect. The more that I tried to find God's love, the more I realized that I was not perfect, and thereby, in my own mind, not lovable. And then to further my confusion, I was given a book on ancient religions of the world. Mythology, it called it. And in these pages, I devoured each one. Each story was more impressive than the other, and I had to see, I had to learn, I had to know. And this book told me about ancient deities that were virgin queens whom had given birth to half God and half man. That many of them died and were resurrected and brought back into this world. And I was really confused. And I went to my mother and father and I said, how is it that when I read these stories, like Isis and Horus, when I read these ancient stories, they sound like the story of Christ. They sound like a virgin who gave birth to a god, and then this god ends up by dying and coming back. How is it the same when this happened 10,000 years ago and Jesus only happened 2,000 years ago? How do we know? And they said, well, the devil is very smart. The devil existed in heaven with Jesus. And he knew God. And he knew God's plan. And he, being the devil, wanted desperately to offend Christ and to create false Christs so that more people would be confused and then turn from the real Christ when Christ came, and then they would go to hell with him and burn forever. And I was as confused then as I am now. If the devil had the foresight to create these things before God could get the idea to create these things, I don't understand how that the devil cheated when he created the originals. I don't understand that. I still don't. To add more to the confusion, as a teenager, 12, 13, dealing with emotions and feelings that I didn't quite understand, we went on a holiday and the camper, the RV, broke down and they made it into a parking lot of a Walmart. And this devout Christian woman, thinking that she was doing the will of God, strikes up a conversation with my father, and she's introduced to the entire family, and she, in an act of generosity to strangers, said to my father and to my mother, come to my house, spend the night at my house until the parts arrive, come to my house. And my family was grateful, and they did. And then this woman says that she is a prophetess, that she sometimes would know when people were going to die, and she would know what demons people were struggling with. And she looked at me and she says, I know, to me and to my mother, I know what demons you're fighting. And I think we need to pray the gay demon away. Again, I didn't know really anything about this. I didn't understand. But I did, but I didn't. And I dove in. Oh, how I dove into that church. I became a Sunday school teacher, and I became a choir director, and I was on my way to becoming a licensed minister in the Assemblies of God Church. And in the back of my mind, I remembered when I was a kid, my brother-in-law, Pentecostal, my late brother-in-law, being a Pentecostal, preaching a sermon And he said this in that sermon. He said, "Them liberal Democrats in California, they want to kill babies. They want to make abortion legal. They want to be able to make women kill their own babies. And then they turn around and they say, you can tell in the womb which babies might be gay. Well, I have a deal to make with you Democrat liberals in California. If you want to kill babies so much, why don't you kill the queer babies and leave the normal babies?" I also remember the times that I would go to church and they would whisper behind the backs. And the times that the pastor of those churches would come to me and say, "Well, I don't think it's true, but Sister so-and-so is really kind of worried about your soul. She thinks you might be a homosexual. Now, I don't think it's true. I think you're lovely." And then there was another sermon that I remember that was preached. This sermon, they talked about, and this was always on my mind. This one kept me on the straight and narrow. Because I heard this sermon, I don't even remember where, but I heard this sermon about this man whom was a good Christian man. And he was blessed by God, and he was a Sunday school teacher, and he was a choir director, and he became a minister. And then he became a homosexual. And the next thing you know, he's a satanic priest. Well, and the next thing you know, he died, and you know he went to hell. I was terrified. I was terrified that if I did anything that was pleasurable, that God, in his infinite wisdom and grace, would instantaneously send me to a fiery pit of hell. And I kept my nose down. And in spite of all of these questions and the fact that I didn't feel welcome, I kept it down. I kept it aside. I stopped it. Sort of like that song, "Turn It Off Like a Light Switch" from the Book of Mormon. Turn it off. But I couldn't turn it off. I didn't turn it off. And now, in the years since I have left the church, I am happier with myself than I have ever been in my entire existence. I am out and proud and flamboyant and fun, and I love the person that I am. I love it. And you can too. I know where you may be may seem like a struggle. You may feel that there is nobody who understands you. You may feel alone. You may be fighting suicide. You may feel like you have to be perfect and you're not. And I love you. And you are important to me. You exist, and it's a darn good thing you do. My friends, I want to send it over to my friend the devil and Asmodeus.
Hey, Asmodeus and Hecate. Do you know why churches have expiration dates?
I didn't know they did.
Of course they have expiration dates. They're perishable. Get it? Perishable. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you so much. And thank you at home. Happy Pride Month, my friends. Love to you. Make certain you check out my Patreon for behind the scenes you don't want to miss out. There are other ways to support this channel, links in the bio. And as always, I've been your host, Richard-Lael Lillard. the gentleman psychic. Till next time.
I surely do. Lucky little devil. I worry more and more over your popularity. How can I picture you getting sweet on me? Lucky little devil, your love dreams are bound to come true. I wish mine would too. Lucky little devil.